to our present farm in 1935 from Prescott, Washington, and we attended church there in a typical small-town Presbyterian church, and then to walk into the stone building and see the sanctuary, and especially the organ facade, was really made a big impression on me as a young person. And I've always been kind of curious about the organ ever since.
One of the first memories of being here was as a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and the manse, which was alongside the building here, and attending Sunday school there. And then again in high school, when our high school group got large, we would meet in the basement of the manse several times before this old addition was built on. So, yeah.
We just had the church basement to hold our meetings and dinners, and the kitchen was right close by. But this big downstairs was where all the meetings and fellowship held. And Ruth used to bring a table. She would find a table that she liked at home that she'd take down to make the reception so nice. She would take some of her linens maybe, and she always made the receptions down that basement look very nice.
They used to have all the dinners down in the church basement. And way before my time, they had laid down 2x4s and then hardwood floor in the basement. When you walk over, it was like walking over a drum. It was really noisy. And then when they remodeled, they took all that out and went down to the original concrete floor.
So it was great when they built the new addition.
We knew that we wanted a fellowship hall for the entire congregation to have a place to meet, and then we wanted classrooms for teaching the youngsters. It probably took 4 or 5 years, and I don't know when it was built, probably in the 60s, 1960s, and we had a lot of good discussions. We had everything from the congregational meetings to smaller study groups to discuss what would be in that wing.
One of the elders in the church owned a construction company, and they're the ones that built the addition to the church, the Christian Education Building.
Well, an example of a couple that gave their time in service to the Lord and to other people in the church here would be Irv and Ada Chapman. I really, really love them so much. And they've been gone quite a while now. But Irv retired from the gravel pit here and working in the office at the gravel pit. And then in his retirement, he took on the job of being the custodian at the church. And at that time, when I first started working here, we were still feeding the boiler in the basement coal. We had the Mahan Fuel Company deliver coal into the coal chute that used to be at the back of the church, and it went straight down into the basement into a room where we just had nothing in there but coal. A lot of times, if it was something that was happening early at the church, Irv would have to get up about 4 a.m. and come down here and shovel coal into the boiler so that it could be boiling faster, not just warm. It had to be boiling to have heat. So I always think that is really being faithful to the Lord to shovel coal. Yeah.
Well, Easter was always a big deal because the panel on the right-hand side of the congregation lifted up, and the Sunday school room was a flat space with a horseshoe balcony around, and then they had Sunday school rooms were partitioned off and it's closed by a monk's cloth curtain. And on Easter Sunday, of course, they would put a a lot of forsythia, and people back in those days had canaries in bird cages, so they'd put a bird cage with the canaries in the forsythia where you couldn't hear them, see them rather, and then when the organ played, the canaries would trill along with the organ. It was really quite interesting. And of course, everybody dressed up. The women all wore hats, and it was really quite festive. Then they raised the curtain, and people sat in chairs and in the half of the balcony of the Sunday school room, because that was always a big attendance day. Wow. And then the partition was raised with a hand winch that was down in the basement, and some of the youngsters, this was after, I think while I was overseas, were playing that winch while the panel was up, tripped the catch on, the whole thing came down during the service. It was just very fortunate nobody was seated under it, but it would have been bad news.
Oh, the first time I was in Presbyterian, I was awestruck. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous old building. I swear we have the most gorgeous sanctuary in town.
It's the fourth oldest Skinner organ in its original configuration. They got the organ installed when they built the church, but they didn't play it until it was paid for. And I think the lady that was part of the family that owned the big flour mill in Waitsburg helped with a substantial contribution that paid it off so they could play it. They used to have monk's cloth behind the pipe so you couldn't see any of the background, but it got so filled with dust it impeded the sound of the organ, so they took all that out, and it's just as it is today, except that over a period of time they have added more ranks. One of the organ companies that looked after the organ didn't like the particular sound of the organ, so they took one rank out and had it in cardboard boxes down in the rummage room. And they hired a new, when I was chair of the Senate committee that looked after the organ, they hired a man who was sitting in business in Portland. He had a master's degree in organ music from one of the big California schools. And the first thing he did was set it all back up in its original configuration. And we also added the Zimbelstern during that period. And the way they tuned the organ was as they had a parallel slice on the top of the pipe and a key, just like a key when you open a tuna fish can. And they rolled that up and down to tune it. And then they took all the pipes and sent them to Montreal, I believe it was, to an organ company up there, and they cut all that off and added sleeves. So they just drive the sleeves up and down now to tune it. It's much more accurate and much nicer. They cleaned it. They had a cleaning process where they took all the metal pipes out, carried them down to the basement, gave them an acid bath and cleaned them up, and so there's a lot of trips up and down, carrying one or two pipes all the way down to the basement and back up.
So we joined in the fall of 1958, and it was the sanctuary was very much like it is now.
We would have every Sunday of the Christmas season, we would have a different class present a portion of the Christmas story. We would go into worship and present it to everyone else. And I just loved Christmas time with those plays because you never knew. And watching Bob Kripe, many of you remember him, with a lamb's head on his on top of his head, and walking down the aisle with the 2- and 3-year-olds saying bah, bah. It was just precious.
The sanctuary remodel you could tell that it was the shell was getting old and tired, and it needed to be refreshed, and it needed to function better. We needed to add equipment.
If I wanted to change any of the lighting, the overheads, or create any sort of lighting atmosphere, I literally had to go back to the back panel, outside the fellowship hall, outside the sanctuary, down the hallway, clear down to the electrical panels in the back hallway, and then station somebody out at the beginning of the hallway to give me a cue to say that I could hear it, so I knew when to turn the circuit breakers off.
Part of the remodeling time, we'd had that horrible ice storm, which made a lot of water coming through the roof, and and caused us to have to do that all over again, because it happened right at the end of having been finished. So really, it's been done twice.
But in the meantime, while they were working on the construction, worship was held in the fellowship hall. And so we would have to go in there, find a place to sit, and Albert and everybody would be up on one of the stages and conduct the worship service. And it was done, well done. They worked all the kinks out. It was well done, and it was very nice, but it was quite a change for us. And then you got to say that we're going into the sanctuary. So that was exciting.
To see the sanctuary, when we had finished redecorating it, felt like you were going into a church like in England or France or someplace where they have these lovely cathedral-type churches. It just felt so uplifting. I thought it was uplifting.
Because you had the new carpet, you had the new coverings for the pews, and there are a lot of other things that were behind the walls, but quite a dramatic change for us. So it was good, very good. Everything's been very good. Every remodel job that we've done. Look at this atrium. It's all exciting, very exciting.
The arson fire that we had here was extremely unsettling.
That was very unsettling. And it took place, I believe, in the kitchen. So that was very, if the arsonist is amongst you, not that you fear them, but you have to wonder, what's next? I think that someone would do that deliberately to a church is sobering.
Because they did not find the person who set the church on fire. And that gives you a feeling of anxiousness, sort of, because you don't know when you come to work what you're going to find if one day you came to work and found an arson fire.
Generally, I recall it happened, and we discussed what to do and how to move forward. And this, I think, took a period of months to determine everything. Went ahead and moved ahead, and actually, we didn't change the structures much at all. Either the sanctuary or the Christian education wing were still basically left in the same manner they were. They were just needed repairs were done, and it was fixed up.
They took every blessed thing out of the office. All the equipment that would move, every paper, pen, everything was out of the office. I did enjoy very much the office trailers over there in the parking lot, because where they put me was the very back office, so that people coming in had to go through 2 or 3 people before they got to me, which was the only time in my whole career working here, 44 years, that I had that kind of situation where somebody had to take stuff ahead of me. So I enjoyed that. In fact, I said that when they moved the trailers and hooked them up and moved them because we were ready to come back, I was just going to hang out the window waving goodbye to the church. The thing that is the most special about this place, this church, Walla Presbyterian Church on the corner, First and Birch, I think that it's the fact that they're a church family, and the people who come here and worship here, care about one another, and they try their hardest to live a life that glorifies God and fulfills what He wants them to do. I think that's why it's been here so long, why it's been here 150 years, is because it's had active love and care poured into it all the time.